The hum of the Boeing 737 filled the cabin of Flight 472 as it sat on the tarmac, preparing for takeoff from Dulles International Airport. Passengers fidgeted with their seatbelts, stowed carry-ons, and scrolled through their phones one last time before the inevitable "turn off your devices" announcement. The air was thick with the usual mix of jet fuel fumes and recycled oxygen, but for one woman in row 12, seat A, it carried an extra weight: the weight of history. Aisha Monroe adjusted herself in the narrow seat, her hands resting protectively on her 8-month pregnant belly. At 38, she was a vision of resilience, dark skin glowing despite the exhaustion etched into her features. Just 3 days ago, she'd stood on the steps of the Capitol, her right hand raised, swearing an oath as the first black woman to become president of the United States. The moment had been electric, a seismic shift in a nation still grappling with its past. Now she was on this unassuming commercial flight, a last-minute decision to visit her ailing mother in Atlanta before the White House swallowed her life whole. Her security detail had reluctantly agreed, blending into the cabin in plain clothes, though their watchful eyes never strayed far. At the front of the plane, Karen Withers strutted down the aisle, her navy blue uniform pressed to perfection, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun. 15 years as a flight attendant had honed her into a self-proclaimed arbiter of airborne order. She thrived on the power her clipboard and badge afforded her, doling out commands with a thin-lipped smile that never reached her eyes. As she scanned the passengers, her gaze snagged on Aisha. Something about the woman, the way she sat with quiet dignity, her expensive coat draped over the armrest, her very presence, set Karen's nerves on edge. "Ma'am," Karen said, her voice clipped as she stopped beside Aisha's seat, "you need to move that bag under your seat. It's a safety hazard." Aisha glanced down at her small leather tote, already tucked neatly beneath the seat in front of her, well within regulations. She'd flown enough to know the drill. "It's already stowed," she replied calmly, meeting Karen's gaze. "I made sure of it." Karen's eyes narrowed, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. "I don't think so. It's sticking. Out. Fix it." Aisha sighed, the weight of the past week pressing down on her. She leaned forward with some effort, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward, and nudged the bag an inch deeper under the seat. "There," she said, straightening up. "Happy now?" The edge of sarcasm in Aisha's tone was subtle, but it hit Karen like a match to dry grass. Her jaw tightened, and she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. People always think you're above the rules, don't you?" Aisha froze, the words slicing through the air like a blade. She'd heard that phrase, or variations of it, too many times in her life, from courtrooms to campaign trails. But today, after all she'd achieved, it stung deeper. Before she could respond, Karen's hand lashed out, striking Aisha across the face with a sharp, resounding slap. The sound ricocheted through the cabin, silencing the hum of conversation. Gasps erupted from nearby passengers. A teenage girl in row 13 fumbled for her phone, hitting record. An older man across the aisle muttered, "What the hell?" Aisha's cheek burned, but she didn't flinch. Slowly, she turned her head back, her brown eyes locking onto Karen's with an intensity that could melt steel. "You have no idea who you just hit," she said, her voice low and steady, carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken victories. Karen smirked, crossing her arms. "I don't care who you are, lady. On this plane, I'm in charge. You don't talk back to me." A rustle came from 2 rows back as a broad-shouldered man in a dark suit stood, his earpiece buzzing faintly. "Ma'am," he said, his tone sharp enough to cut glass, "step away from her now." He flashed a badge, Secret Service, and the air in the cabin shifted. Another agent materialized from the rear, moving with quiet precision toward the scene. Karen's smirk faltered, her eyes darting between the men and Aisha. "What's this? Some kind of stunt? You think you can intimidate me?" Aisha rose from her seat, her pregnant frame imposing despite its vulnerability. The cabin seemed to shrink around her as she spoke, her voice ringing with authority. "No stunt. I'm Aisha Monroe, President of the United States." And you just assaulted me in front of 50 witnesses. The words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. Karen's face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for water. I didn't know, she stammered, her hands trembling. I didn't mean, please, Save it. Aisha cut her off, brushing past her toward the front of the plane. Her security detail flanked her, one of them already on the phone with ground control.